Welcome to the talk show Life Stories with Marc Hoberman. The goal of this show is to provide a learning experience to people of all ages, with guests from various fields in academics, a wide range of industries, and insight into the many forms of art, athletics, and entertainment. We hope you enjoy the show. The multi-talented Nana Ashhurst is today's guest. Nana will talk about her time as the president of Def Jam Records. She will also talk about the exciting grand opening of the Hip Hop Museum.
Nana Ashhurst, welcome to Life Stories with Marc Hoberman.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So happy to have you. Nana, do me a favor. Give us a glimpse into the world of the child Nana before all these many amazing things happened.
Well, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I was a child of activists. I had a mother, father, a stepmother, and a stepfather. And my parents divorced when I was 7, and my mother remarried at 9. My father remarried when I was 10, and all 4 of my parents were community activists. My stepfather was the most progressive. So I grew up in a humanist household. I grew up as an atheist, and I grew up in the Ethical Culture Society in Brooklyn. And my stepfather was very active in the teachers union in Brooklyn. And at that time, there was a movement to get the schools integrated and the schools to responsive to the Black community. There was a big strike, the Ocean Hill-Brownsville strike in 1964. I was a picket line captain at age 14. And my stepfather and my mother ran a freedom school during the days that they were on strike. So I grew up understanding that I knew Malcolm X. My stepfather worked with him in forming his new organization, the Organization of African American Unity. And in fact, my stepfather was a pallbearer at Malcolm X's funeral. Mm. So that was how I grew up. And so I grew up. I was a member of Student Congress for Racial Equality in high school. So even before I went to college, I went to college in the Midwest at McMurray College in Jacksonville, Illinois, and I was a founding member of the Black Student Union there. It was summer of '68. I got there in '67. Summer of '68, all hell broke loose nationwide, as you know, and my campus was no different. And so I was an activist throughout college.
Well, so many things resonate with me because, as you know, I was an educator, and I was actually a chief building rep for a year and a union rep for my English department for about 7 or 8 years. Mm. And it was not easy. It's very political. I applaud the efforts of your family. That's incredible. But I got to ask you now, I didn't know a lot of this background. I did a deep dive, but I didn't know about some of the things you just mentioned. So not to say PTSD, but what went through your mind recently last year with all the protests at colleges, because that had to bring back some not fond memories?
Both fond and not fond. I was glad to see young people engaged. Mm-hmm. I was glad to see that people were still against the war, mm-hmm. And were trying to look for ways to bring peace to get rid of oppression. So I was glad to see that. It was interesting that campuses had not gone very far in learning how to actually deal with campus protests. And so that was, when do you bring in the police and when do you don't, and all of that. But I think that campuses are a place where students are supposed to actually engage with ideas and to learn how to engage with the world. So I was glad to see it.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. And it's a shame that some of the ones that didn't know how to do it or what they were doing just didn't lend anything to the cause. And people who did it respectfully did so much for the cause. So you have that background, and you did say, if I heard you correctly, that you were an atheist as a young person.
I grew up as an atheist, but in my 20s, when I was in Boston, Massachusetts, I was working on a television station. I was an associate producer on a show called The Third World, and I wanted to do a show about how the Black church was taking advantage of the Black community. So I went out and started interviewing people in the community, and I went to this church to shoot what was supposed to be background footage, B-roll for the show. And 3 weeks in a row I went, and the pastor there preached. It was a wonderful church. They were engaged with the apartheid activism. They were engaged with community building in the community in Cambridge, Massachusetts itself. They had there were a lot of students. Cambridge is a big college town, as you know. Boston is a big college town, and there are a lot of students there who were away from home and didn't have family. And so the church actually gave members cards, index cards with students' names to invite them over to their homes and to make them not feel alone. So I just felt really moved by the community of the church. And before I knew it, I was walking down the aisle and joining the church, and my camera crew was stunned to see me do this. And instead of doing a show about the bad part of the Black church, I ended up doing a show called Praise the Lord. And I've been involved with the church ever since.
Oh yeah. So I was going to say that switch definitely got flipped in adulthood to you. So so now the religious aspect enters your life, but people always talk about the eyes on the prize. But when did you first realize that your eyes were on the prize of business greatness?
Well, not until I was in my late 30s. So I in the 80s, right? In fact, the day that Ronald Reagan was elected president, I left the country and moved to Grenada, the country of Grenada, which was involved in a revolution at the time. And I went there to help. I had a job with the government helping set up a television station. And I was there for 2.5 years. And my job was to actually document the day-to-day operations of a revolution. And it was an extraordinary experience. This country was coming out of neocolonialism. The Prime Minister Maurice Bishop was leading people to had been a literacy rate of 14%, and he got it up to, in 4 years, up past 70%. You know, it was just it was healthcare was engaged in the community. I mean, it was just an extraordinary experience, and monthly meetings within the villages and just engaged. However, it imploded. The factions within the government fell apart, and when 1983. Maurice Bishop was assassinated, and then a week later, Ronald Reagan invaded Grenada, and the second target was my television station. By then, I had come back to the United States and was working on a documentary about Grenada called "The Future Coming Towards Us," and I was showing the film when I found out that Maurice Bishop was assassinated.
Unbelievable. Well, I want to dig in a little deeper into all this work that you've done in television and journalism and whatnot. But when you started out, being a woman in a man's world was hard enough. But being a woman of color must have made your climb that much harder. Where does that resilience come from?
Well, I was always interested in working within the Black community. So I was doing Black shows and Black film and Black country Grenada, Black country. So I actually gave myself my own niche, you know, of what to do. But when I moved into the music business, which came later, I was in a niche, hip hop, but within a much larger music business, and it was very difficult to actually navigate and prove that we were as valuable to the music business as we were. Even though everybody knows that how pivotal black people are to music in America, you'd be amazed at how difficult it is to get parity in the industry.
Yeah, for sure. But walk us through, because I'd love the young viewers to know about this. So what did you do when you hit those roadblocks? Obviously, we're here today, so you didn't give up. But some people do give up, and it is too much for some people. So what kind of advice, or what kind of, from your lens, how do you navigate those difficulties?
Well, I think you have to have confidence. Or I had to have confidence. I had to believe that the work that I was doing was valuable, and unfortunately, I had to swallow a lot. I have to admit that it was not always the most. I didn't always get this as respectful treatment as I should, and I accepted it often. So I had to pick my battles. I had to decide when I was going to when it was worth throwing down for, and pick them and work with people. I had to create liaisons with other people I worked with, so that I tried hard not to be alone in struggle. So I'd say those are the kind of things.
Well, you know, I interviewed Gloria Hendry, who was known as the first ever Black Bond girl, first love interest ever. And I'm hearing the same kind of things here. And I think that that people don't realize how very difficult some of these things are, because they hear about, the glitz and the glamour. But on my show, we often talk about the story behind the glory. So could you discuss maybe one or two of the biggest obstacles that you had to overcome to be the success that you obviously did become?
Well, I think actually in hip hop, the hardest part was the sexism. That it was very difficult. It's very much it was at that point, and I guess still is, what, a man's dominated world, and very crude, very coarse. And I did not come up in a coarse environment. So I had to put up with the Me Too movement has made some of the things that I dealt with no longer happen.
Mm-hmm.
When I first, I worked for Russell Simmons, who you've heard of, right? And he was my boss. And when I first met him, I was working for his publicist, Bill Adler, who's the person who hired me at Def Jam. And when Russell met me, it was actually on the phone, on a speakerphone. Bill introduced him to me and said, "This is my assistant." At that time, I was called Carmen Ashhurst. And Russell said, "Oh, so are you sticking her yet?" So that's how I met him.
Mm.
And I had to decide then, was I going to keep the job, or was I going to let him say such a thing and keep moving forward? So I obviously took it. But it was that level of discussion that would happen every day. People talked about their sex lives literally daily in the office. And it was difficult for me.
Wow. Boy, have things changed.
Yes.
since then. And thank you for being so transparent and open about that experience. So you're a leader in your field. You're not just, and I'm not going to say just the assistant. I'm sure you did so much as an assistant. But now
by the time I came to be an assistant, that was a step down for me. I had actually run the television station in Grenada. And then when I came back to the United States, I had all this experience of setting up a business from scratch. And so I came with that. I brought that to the table. And so I was able to show Russell how to set up his business, how to set up separate bank accounts for each of the organizations, how to set up an organizational chart, how to create departments. So I brought that to Def Jam. And so I went from being the publicist's assistant to the president's assistant to the chief operating officer to the vice president to the president in a year and a half.
I'd love to hear a little bit about that roadmap, because as you said, the sexism was tough. What did you bring to the table that that year and a half, that takes people 22 and a half years.
Yeah, so
if Russell get that far.
Well, Russell was a great visionary. Absolutely. He had a vision for what hip hop could be. People at that time were thinking that it was a fad. He knew it was a mainstream genre and that he could sell it worldwide. And he refused to compromise on that. He did not want to be marginalized as just Black music in the corner. But he did not have a structure. And so I was able to convince him that with the structure, he could institutionalize and get more done. And he eventually gave me that part of the business. And so it made it possible for him to actually be freer in his thinking, because he did not have to worry about the business part of his operation. So I brought that to the table, and I had learned that setting up the television station in Grenada.
Right. I was going to ask you, where did that knowledge come from? It just didn't come to you one night over sleep. So there's nothing better than on the job learning and getting your hands dirty, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So with Def Jam Recordings, what kind of experiences did you have during your tenure there as the president of Def Jam Recordings?
Well, when I got there, my big acts were LL Cool J, Public Enemy, and Slick Rick. So I got there when it was doing well, but none of these acts had broken. They had not been sold big records before. LL Cool J had sold gold. Right? We also had a management company, Rust Artist Management, that managed Run DMC, Big Daddy Kane, Eric B. and Rakim, a number of big acts at the time, Houdini, Curtis Blow. In fact, Curtis Blow was on Def Jam before I got there. Right? But these acts had not broken through. So it was Russell's marketing plan that actually brought first thing he did was he got Russell Run DMC to do a record with Aerosmith called Walk This Way.
Mm-hmm.
And that became the very first platinum album, hip hop album. Right, Curtis Blow was the first gold hip hop record, and but it was his marketing strategy that made it possible for us to not just be on black radio. In fact, black radio was resistant to hip hop. They thought it was crude. They didn't like it. They liked the Motown look. They liked the people who looked very clean and were more palatable to a white audience. And they didn't think that a white audience would like hip hop, would like black kids from the streets. And they were wrong. White kids loved black kids from the streets, wanted to look like them, wanted to wear the hats backward. That actually came out of hip hop, wear your baseball cap backwards. And so he knew that white kids actually followed black kids for style and fashion, and he decided to sell that. And so he decided not to just sell hip hop as music, but to sell it as a culture. So it was fashion, it was language, it was dance, it was tagging, graffiti. So he sold the whole thing, and he made a lot of money.
Yep. Well, marketing truly is king. I was honored and lucky enough to have Curtis Blow as a guest on my show, and that's the greatest answer, because I said, hey, people don't know the difference. Is there a difference between hip hop and rap? And he said exactly what you said. It's not music, it is a culture. Right. And I can tell you that I saw that culture unwind while I was teaching.
In the Bronx?
And I saw the change in the type of people who were listening, and it really was pretty much a movement.
Yes.
Really incredible. And I even had DC Glenn, who was part of a tag team, Whoop There It Is, on the show as well. And people don't realize that this wasn't like, here we are, here's the song. I love the fact that you told me they haven't really popped yet. They were there, but they weren't really well known. So the fact that it's not just talent, people out there watching, talent is not enough, luck is not enough, it's perseverance. But thank goodness they found the team, and they found you, someone who could take them to that next level. So
one thing Russell did that amazed me when I saw him do it. So records used to come out, before streaming, they got sold in record stores, right? Mm-hmm. And they got sold, and you heard it on the radio. Mm-hmm. Right? And the radio stations all changed their playlists on Tuesday, and record stores all got new records on Tuesday. So everything got delivered on Tuesday. So Russell, one Monday, would sit on the sofa, get a bowl of popcorn, and then start calling program managers and radio stations across the country, over 100 in his head. He knew their numbers in his head. Wow. And he knew their names, and he had a story for when he met them, the last time he hung out with them, and what women he had introduced them to, and all that. He had a story for each one, and then just talked them into playing his record, because every label was trying to get their record on, and there were only 2 spots for every that were free for the playlist. The rotation, where they would only free up 2 spots every week. So it was a very, very competitive to get your record played on radio. But Russell made it a personal. He made a personal touch with each person. It was labor intensive, but he got it done, and the records got on. And Public Enemy sold. In fact, these are my platinum albums here for Public Enemy, LL Cool J, and the Slick Rick. Unbelievable.
No, the business genius of Russell Simmons is it's almost common knowledge now, but mm-hmm. that is so incredible. It's funny because now, since there's been cell phones, I used to remember phone numbers like you wouldn't believe it. I can't tell you. I have 2 sons. I can't tell you their phone number. I'd have to look it up. So mm-hmm. that old school way, there's no better way, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So you've been involved in so much. You do so much for the Black community. Aren't you involved in some kind of mental health issues and making that better in the Black community?
In the church, in the Black church, yeah. So I suffered with depression, and depression is a subject that had long been a taboo in the Black community in general, and certainly in the Black church. If you're down, you should pray. Right? It was the general feeling, and there wasn't a lot of support, and it's still difficult, right, to get the church to acknowledge that mental health was real, that mental health required sometimes require medication, sometimes requires therapy, but often requires something that the pastor cannot give. The pastor can give you support as you get help, but you need to get help. So I have been when I preach, I have preached on the subject of depression several times, and I've led workshops about the subject, and have been happy to see that the taboo has been lifted in some ways in the church, and I'm glad to be a part of that movement.
Wow, it's great that you do all that work, and unfortunately, I hope you're talking to young people too, because as an educator, the percentage of young people who report being depressed and stressed out in middle school and high school, it's over 75%. That number is unheard of, and the fact that you're helping so many people is such a wonderful thing. So let's now talk about what's on the horizon. So what can you tell us about the exciting work you're doing as the chairperson of the Hip Hop Museum?
So I'm the chair emerita now.
Okay.
And Curtis Blow was my predecessor, so he and I are the two chair emerita, right? And as the Hip Hop Museum is in the Bronx. It's taken 14 years to get to this point, but it opens next June. It's right on the East River. It's right across the 145th Street from Harlem, so it's a great location, a beautiful view, 54,000 square feet. And it's part of it's also been a community development project. So it's also 140 affordable housing units are above the building. And we open soon. And it's a place where all of the culture is being preserved, and also to present day panels and so on, as education programs going on. It's a real museum. It's wonderful.
Outstanding. So
Rocky Bucano is our executive director. And he had this vision, and he's kept it and made it happen.
That's great. And then, nothing worthwhile comes easy, and 14 years is a long time. But we have about a minute left, Nana. So I'd like to know what the hip hop culture means and has meant to you.
Well, to me, it was very empowering for young people. I found that it gave people a voice, that people felt comfortable being who they were, and wanted to speak. I'm a little, I do not like the level of sexualization that has come to the music now, but I still feel that it's an empowering genre. And I like the way that it brings not just Black kids together, but it's also engages kids of all cultures with an understanding of joy. That's what I like about it.
It's great, and all your accomplishments are so incredible. So Nana Ashhurst, thank you so much for being today's guest and sharing your incredible journey with us, and you're still on it. For all those watching, I hope Nana's groundbreaking journey has shown you that following your passion is not always easy, but nothing worthwhile really is. We love to hear from you, so stay connected with us on social media. Find us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, X, and LinkedIn. Don't forget to like us and follow us for the latest episode updates and exciting new content. Nana Ashhurst, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching Life Stories with Marc Hoberman. To contact Marc, email him at info@lifestorieswithmarchoberman.com or visit him on social media through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Thank you for watching Life Stories with Marc Hoberman.